if you saw the topic or the title, so the title is that Yosef lit Chanukah candles in Mitzrayim, which is every time I say that to someone, they don't know what I'm talking about, which is right on target because there's no such medrash, there's no such chazal. But I had this idea that I wanted to share with you. So we'll start like this. In last week's parsha, so we find two psukim that seem rather innocuous at first, but when you start to think about it, they do seem redundant. And what's the chiddush? So the first pasuk is when it talks about Yosef and he ended up in Mitzrayim. So he was by this fellow Potiphar. And as we know, Yosef, whatever he did, he was very successful. So the Torah says, V'yashem es Yosef, v'ish matzliach, v'ibeves adonov ha-Mitzri. Hashem was with Yosef. He was a successful guy. And he was in the home of his master, the Egyptian. So far we know, okay, Hashem was with Yosef and he was successful. The next pasuk, so you have to tell me what you think is the chiddush. What's it adding? V'yar adonov, his master saw, ki Hashem ito, Hashem was with him. V'chol asher hu oseh, and everything he did, Hashem matzliach biyado, Hashem enabled him to be successful. What's the difference between the first pasuk and the second pasuk? Hashem was with Yosef, he was really successful. Where was he? In the house of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw he was really successful. Okay, of course his master saw he's successful. That's what he was doing there, being successful. Like what's going on over here? So here's the question, yeah? What's the second pasuk really adding that we didn't know before? So I think it's pretty clear, just on a simple reading, that the second pasuk is adding that his master saw it. Doesn't seem like a big chiddush, but okay. It could have been that Yosef was successful and his master didn't notice. What's strange is that his master is pointed out to be a Mitzri. And most Mitzrayim were not so from. I mean, maybe they were from in terms of their avodah zarah, but they weren't so from in terms of their relationship with Yudke, Vavke, with Elokim, with Hashem. So when it says, Vayar Adonov ki Hashem ito, so there's a few questions that you could ask on that. First of all, what does it mean that his master saw that Hashem was with him? How do you see that Hashem is with someone? HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't consult me when he was writing this, but if he would have, I would have said you should write, his master saw that he was successful, because that's what you see. You see success. You don't see that Hashem is with someone. You could interpret it that way. You may have all kinds of reasons why you think that's the reason, but that's not what you see. So it could have said something like, Vayar Adonov, his master saw that Yosef was successful and he attributed it to Hashem, which of course is the second question. What good Egyptian is going to attribute this to Hashem? There are lots of Egyptian gods. Well, why not attribute it to one of them? So you hear that? You think it's a good question? You with me? So that's what's going on in this Rashi. Rashi writes, Ki Hashem ito, that he saw that Hashem was with him. Shem Shamayim Shagur Befiv. Shem Shamayim, the name of Shamayim, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, was fluent in Yosef's mouth. Yeah, so in other words, Yosef was very from, and he went around saying, oh, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, everything is Baruch Hashem. But what it would mean, what Rashi is saying is that that's what his master saw. How did his master see that? Number one, how do you see it? And number two, why should he attribute it to Hashem? So the answer is because Yosef presented himself in a way that he was constantly attributing his success to Hashem to such an extent that even an avodah zarah Egyptian recognized, wow, I guess this must be his God. He's so successful. So that's what Rashi's getting at. And I want to make the argument that in effect, those were Yosef's Chanukah candles in Mitzrayim. And this is what I want to explain. The next source here is a Rambam. And the Rambam says something that's quoted in Shulchan Aruch and is, I think, the most astonishing halacha of Chanukah. I don't know how much of the Rambam and the Mishnah Torah you've learned, but the Rambam was a real straight shooter when it comes to halacha. He doesn't write poetry in his Mishnah Torah. It was the first collection and encyclopedic collection of Torah Sheba'al Peh. And the Rambam writes, Mitzvahs ner Chanukah, mitzvah chaviva hi ad mo'od. It's a very precious, precious mitzvah. Now, I guess the proof is that you see from here that the Rambam liked Karlbach, because you can kind of hear him doing this. Oh, mitzvah Chanukah is so precious, so precious. It's so precious, so precious. It sounds like that's what the Rambam's doing, and it's funny. It's strange, but that's what he says. A person has to be very careful about this mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, in order to inform about this miracle, and to add praise to Hashem, and thanksgiving to Him, al hanisim, here he has plural, for the miracles that He did to us. So now the Rambam didn't say, so it's precious, so therefore what? Like it's very precious, and so that's an attitude. But what does it have to do with halacha? So the Rambam says it expresses itself as a halacha. If a person, Rahman al-Itzlan, has nothing to eat except what he received from handouts, from charity, from tzedakah, sho'el, he has to borrow money, or mocher ksuso, or sell his clothes, v'lokeach shemen v'neros u'madlik, so that he can have Chanukah candles to light. Now this is astonishing, number one, because, wow, I guess that's a very special mitzvah, and why should it be more special than anything else? But even more than that, in Shulchan Aruch, the fact that this is quoted is at odds with another halacha, which is how much do you actually have to spend on a mitzvah aseh? So have you ever heard this question before? Imagine you have a person, comes from the middle of nowhere, never knew he was Jewish, becomes a Baal Tshuva, discovers that there's this expensive mitzvah called tefillin. There's nobody else that has tefillin. He goes home and he has to get tefillin. And he calls up the sofer and he says, how much? So what's the halacha? How much money does a person have to spend to be makayim a positive mitzvah? And in Shulchan Aruch, it's clear that you don't have to spend certainly not more than 20% of your money. So even though that means that this person is not going to be fulfilling the mitzvah of tefillin right now, he can borrow if he can get it, but he's not going to be buying it, okay, so he's patur because he's not obligated to spend that amount of money. Is Chanukah different? What about Ner Chanukah? Sell your clothes? A second mortgage? A first mortgage? And a third mortgage? Really? I mean, I'm paying for tuition at YU. This is ridiculous. I have to spend how much? Mocher ksuso. So the Rambam says it's so special, it's so precious. Now, but the question is, wait a minute. This is not a mitzvah's aseh from the Torah, correct? Chanukah? Chanukah's midrabanan. So the tremendous question is, how could it be? How could it be that a person has to spend more money on a mitzvah derabanan of Chanukah more than tefillin, more than a daraisa? How could that be? Anybody have any ideas, any thoughts you wanna suggest? I'll take a sip. You can think about it. So the commentators on the Rambam, so they say the Rambam got this from somewhere else. The Rambam got this from Arba Kosos on Pesach. Arba Kosos on Pesach, you got that one, huh? We got the Tokeir is already he's holding. He's going to give the shir one. He's going to give the shir. So the Rambam says by Arba Kosos that you have to have the Arba Kosos for Pesach. Why? Because there's a mitzvah that's unique called Pirsume Nisa. Pirsume Nisa, and hopefully we'll come back to this a little bit at the end. Pirsume Nisa means to publicize the nes. Apparently, and we have to figure out what this is all about. Apparently, this requirement, this value of publicizing the nes, a nes, all nisim, whatever it is more, I don't know, am I allowed to say this? It's being recorded, I think. It's more fundamental than mitzvos? Okay, not mitzvahs lo saseh, but mitzvahs aseh? It's more fundamental? What does that even mean? So I want to come straight out of left field. Take a look at this Rashi, and you tell me if this is saying the same thing or not. Going back a few parshios to Chayei Sarah, Eliezer is going to find a wife for Yitzchak. And if you remember, the entire story is told twice. The story is told once just as a narrative, this is what happened. And then the story is told again when Eliezer himself tells the story. So instead of the Torah saying, and Eliezer told the story that you already know, the Torah says, and Eliezer said, and he tells the whole story, and the whole story is recorded a second time. Rashi comments from the Medrash, Amar Rabbi Acha, Yafe sichasan shel avdei avos lifnei hamokim. I'm adding the word more. More beautiful is the conversations of the slaves of the avos in front of Hashem. Mitarasan shel banim, more than the Torah of the children. Shahari parsha shel Eliezer kfula b'Torah. The parsha of Eliezer is doubled in the Torah. V'harbe gufei Torah lo nitnu ela b'remiza. And many essential mitzvos are only given to us with a hint. What does that mean? What's that supposed to mean? Yafe sichas shel avdei avos mitarasan shel banim. More beautiful, more precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the conversations of Eliezer and Avram than the Torah, than the mitzvahs themselves. Why? What's the pshat? So you have the sheet there if you want to look more at the sources, but I'm going to end the share so I can just see everybody better. What did Eliezer accomplish? What did his sicha do? What his sicha accomplished was that you had people that were ovdei avodah zarah, and they recognized that this was a nes from Hashem. Mi Hashem yatsa hadavar. Eliezer knew where he was supposed to go. He had the shidduch resume in front of him. He knew he was supposed to go to Lavan and Besuel's house, whether he knew it was exactly Rivka, not exactly Rivka, whatever. But he knew what he was supposed to do, where he was supposed to go. And instead of going, he gets to the well and he says, I remember there was a Rosh Hashiva when I first came to YU. And he used to, every year, got the Chaisera, he would tell the boys, you want to go on a date? I'll tell you what, you take my car. And you take the girl, and you stop at the gas station. And you ask her to fill up gas. And then she says, I fill up your car with gas, and all the other cars at the gas station with gas. So that's the girl you should marry. So Eliezer does this whole shtick so that it'll be a nace, that she'll show up, it'll be a big nace. That was the point. And then when he tells the story to Lavan and Besuel, they say, May Hashem yatsa hadavar. It's Hashem. It's a nace from Hashem. So what's the yafeh? So I think that's the pshat. That the yafeh sichasan is because the conversations here are clarifying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show. No doubt about it. Hashem is running the show. That's more precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than mitzvos. In a lot of ways, that's the goal of the mitzvos. The Chovos HaLevavos writes that Rov Inyan HaMachuven Etzal HaMitzvos Ahoyer Al HaLevavos, that the basic purpose of mitzvos is to connect us to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We should feel closer to Hashem. We should have a relationship with Hashem. We should change our perspectives, our feelings, our behaviors. So that's what it's all about. So if that's what it's all about, so then that's so precious to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what's Pirsumei Nisa? Pirsumei Nisa is the same idea. Now I want to take this a little bit of a step further. Let's dig in a little bit to Pirsumei Nisa, just a little bit. Just trying to say this quickly, the nace of the oil of the Pach Shemen is very, very unique. It was totally unnecessary. You know, if you're in the desert and you're hungry and you don't want to kill all your animals, so Hashem's going to give man. If you're thirsty, He's going to give water. You want to drown all the Mitzrayim? Okay, we'll get them into the Yam Suf. Every nace has a very practical reason. Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't do nisim just because. But what was the purpose of the Pach Shemen? We didn't need it. Everybody knows you could use Tamei oil, or if you're not going to use any oil, if you insist, you'll get it in a few days. Ones Rachana Patre. There's so many reasons why this nace was not necessary. But I want to explain to you, this is my perspective. I want to share with you a thought. I think that there were two battles, two fronts to the Battle of Chanukah. One was, and I'll tell you why. There are two mitzvos of Chanukah. Because on the one hand, we light the Neiros, yeah? But on the other hand, we say something else that has nothing to do with the Neiros. The Alanisim. And davening and benching. And it doesn't mention Neiros. It doesn't mention the Pach Shemen. It doesn't mention the miracle at all. And many have a lot to say about this. But what the point I wanted to make was that is hakaras hatov. When we thank Hashem, it's in Hodah, after all, in the thank you part of davening, and in Noda and benching. It's all about thank you, Hashem. So that's for winning the war. It's for getting rid of oppression. It's for giving us political independence, at least for some time, says the Rambam. But that's not what the Pach Shemen was about. The nace of the Pach Shemen was something else. Because not only did the Yevanim oppress us and prevent us from observing our religion and having political independence in all these ways, they also tried to subvert our perspectives, our hashkafos. They wanted to darken our eyes from Torah, which is separate from keeping us from doing mitzvos. They wanted to supplant our value system. And you've probably heard there's a famous medrash, which is very hard to track down, by the way, where exactly it is, but everyone's heard it since their youth. There were three things that the Greeks outlawed more than anything else, yeah? Mila, Shabbos, and Chodesh. Mila, Shabbos, and Rosh Chodesh. Why those more than anything else? Okay, so many take the approach that maybe these are more definitional to being a Jew. I want to suggest the following. Mila is, if you take the Greek philosophy, the body is beauty, the body is perfection. And anything that man would do is only going to be mutilation. And our perspective is the opposite, that we can perfect creation. Who says who's right? What do you mean? But God told us we can perfect it. Oh yeah, so you say. Shabbos, if you ever read the Kuzari, so Shabbos has no natural component. There's no reason on Earth or any planet why people should be observing a 7-day week. Yeah, you know this? When you talk about a month, why should that, your horoscope, yeah? What's your sign? You ever look this up in the newspaper? They used to have newspapers, and you look it up and it says that your sign is this because if you're born in the middle of this month, in the middle of that month, you're like, where do they get these days from? The answer is because it's a solar calendar, and it's based on the moon. So based on the moon, you have all of the signs of the zodiac. Based on a solar calendar, there's no such thing. It's based on the moon. So if you would ask a Yevani, a Greek, you believe in months? There's, of course, that's the moon cycle. It's a natural cycle. You believe in a 7-day week? You believe in Shabbos? They said, what are you talking about? In fact, years and years later, because the Romans were a carryover of the Greeks. They stole their gods. They changed the underpants, but there was the same gods. And so Turnus Rufus was a Roman, and he came to Rabbi Akiva, and he said to Rabbi Akiva one day, why are you keeping Shabbos? He asked him, Ma yoim mi yomayim. What's the difference between this day and any other day? So Rabbi Akiva has to think quick, and he says, well, what's the difference between you and anybody else? What makes you the general? He says, Rabbi, the king said, I'm the general. So Rabbi Akiva says, yeah, no, so the king said, what do you want from me? Come on, Rabbi, that's a cop-out. Come on, what's the difference in Shabbos and any other day? He wants him to say that there's something that you can demonstrate that makes Shabbos different in the world, and physicality. So Rabbi Akiva says, well, but Mun didn't fall on Shabbos. Rabbi, come on, Mun. You heard of Sambatyon? The lost tribes are behind this river Sambatyon. It's tumultuous the whole week. Shabbos rests. I'm not going to go find Sambatyon, Rabbi. So the Medrash says, Rabbi Akiva said to Turnus Rufus, go find your father's grave because it smokes, because he's suffering in Gehenna. But on Shabbos, Gehenna rests, there won't be any smoke. So Turnus Rufus goes to check it out. And sure enough, his father's grave wasn't smoking. So he comes to Rabbi Akiva and he says, yeah, come on, this was his last day. You knew the last day. He got out, Rabbi Akiva says, go back tomorrow. And sure enough, Motzei Shabbos Sunday, it's smoking again, So that conversation is the same idea. It's a carryover. Physicality, Shabbos no. So they don't believe in Shabbos. It's not part of the physical world. Everything has to be part of the physical world. And what's Chodesh? So again, they don't have a problem with months. They have a problem with Kiddush HaChodesh. They have a problem with what do you have to do with Rosh Chodesh? You're Makadesh the month. It becomes your month. It defines anything. You want to have the moon, there's a moon, fine. But don't tell me that you have a role in all of that. And there's all kinds of unbelievable Yerushalmis that it impacts the physical world and all kinds of things. So that's what I would suggest, is that there was a major hashkafic machlokas, which really, if you want to pin it down into one theme, that is, well, come on, man doesn't have a role in anything. Man doesn't change anything. In fact, spell it out like this. Picture the weatherman. There's the Greek weatherman, and then the rabbi is going to come on in a minute. The Greek weatherman, he points to the jet stream, the high pressure, the low pressure, and this is what's going to be, right? We're all getting ready for the snowstorm, yeah? This is what's going to be. And then the rabbi comes over and he says, mitzvahs, you do mitzvahs, it's going to rain. No mitzvahs, no rain, you know? And that's what we say in Shema. It's going to rain. We do mitzvahs, it rains. And the Chovos HaLevavos writes, the relationship between nature and Torah is like a servant to its master. So we say that every day in Shema. Our mitzvahs change the physical world. And so the Yevanim insist, absolutely not. There's no such thing. Not true. We say, yes, it is. Okay, so prove it. Rabbi Kiva he's struggling to prove it. So how are you going to prove it? How are you going to prove it? And that's the second battlefront of Chanukah. How are you going to prove that we make a difference in the physical world? Mitzvahs matter. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I'll prove it. And they come back into the Beis HaMikdash, and there's only one jar of oil. And they pour it in, they figure at least we'll get one day done. And it keeps going, and it keeps going. How's it possible? It's impossible. It's not possible. This is a physical world. What's going on over here? Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm fighting that battle. I'm fighting the hashkafic battle. You'll see. You do the mitzvahs, you'll see it changes reality. It changes the physical world. That's Pirsume Nisa. That's what our Neiros are all about. That we're making a statement that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is involved in the physical world. So when Eliezer Eved Avram wants these Ovdei Avodah Zarah to recognize Hashem's involvement, so he does it. He does a Pirsume Nisa. He says it again. The whole story, Kadosh Baruch Hu finds that very, very special, very precious. And that's what we have to do. We have to light those Neiros in mitzvah chaviva hi'ad ma'od. Such a precious mitzvah. Why? Because it's Pirsume Nisa. Because it shows that Kadosh Baruch Hu changes the world. Nature is not so natural after all. When Yosef in Mitzrayim is saying Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, you see a successful guy, but that's not what his master saw. His master did not see a successful guy. He saw that Hashem was with him. Those were Yosef's Chanukah candles in Mitzrayim. His Pirsume Nisa. So I just wanted to finish by sharing with you something that it's a perspective that I don't know that we have. When we light Neiros, so you know what we do. We go to our window, everybody has a window, and we get the mishpacha together whenever we can. And we get together and we all light our Neiros together. And then, we have latkes, we spin dreidels, we have Chanukah parties, and where's the menorah? Right there. And we're all basking in the Neiros. The Neiros are there, shining on us as we enjoy Chanukah. But let's trace back the way we're really supposed to light Neiros Chanukah. The Gemara says, where are you supposed to light your menorah? Outside, on the doorway to the street. So you know what we would do? And I guess in Eretz Yisrael they do this. You go out to the street, you light your Chanukah candles, and everybody maybe sings Mosor, and you go inside. How could you have latkes and spin dreidels without a menorah in the window? It's Pirsume Nisa. The mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is for everybody else. We create it, but we're publicizing it for everybody else. To such an extent that nowadays the mitzvah's just changed because we don't do it that way. So it's Pirsume Nisa for the family. And there's a serious shaila if a person's by himself. Can he make the bracha? Because where's the Pirsume Nisa? Is there Pirsume Nisa to yourself? There's Pirsume Nisa to other people, to everybody else. So that's what it means, Pirsume Nisa, and that's what you see by Yosef, that's what you see by Eliezer, and that's what I wanted to create as a theme of Chanukah. That Pirsume Nisa means that it's our responsibility, and we take pride in it, to be able to show the world that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is involved, and that my mitzvos make a difference, and that nature is not so natural, and it can change in a second. COVID can go away as fast as it came. Everything's up to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He runs the world, he runs the show, and that's what it means, Pirsume Nisa. That's what I wanted to share with you.